Hey everyone, welcome back. This week I did want to do a VR video for Subnautica, and I tried to do that. I did the recording and everything, but for whatever reason, Streamlabs decided to record the bottom left part of my screen. So it was a bad video, and you couldn't even see the whole thing. So I just went ahead and scrapped that and decided to make another tier list. So let's get started. Alright, first off, the Aurora. This is how you get the prawn suit in the first game, so just on its own, that's really important. And it has also, the Neptune escape rocket blueprint, which, last I checked, is also pretty important for beating the game. It's a really fun place to go to. It's very important to the game as a whole, so I'm going to give it A tier. Next up, the sea monkey dens. Now, they're cool and all, but they're really confusing, and the sea monkeys there are really annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a D tier. Next up, what I can only assume is the floating island. I really like this biome. It's pretty fun to go to. The crabs there are pretty annoying, but overall you get a lot of blueprints. Most of the time that's where you get the multi-purpose room. So I'm going to give it C tier. Purple vents. Now this place is pretty scary for me, not up there with a lot of the other biomes on this tier list. But overall, it's just a nice biome, it's comfy, it's cozy, and I'm going to give it a B tier. The Twisty Bridges. Now, this place doesn't have a lot going for it. It's a great place to get table coral, but there are other places for that, and I think overall it doesn't really deserve anything higher than C tier, so I'll put it there. Next up, the Lilypad Caves. Now, this place is confusing to go around. It feels completely disconnected from the rest of the map, and overall I think it's more of a burden than anything to have to go to, so I'm going to put it in E tier. Next up, the Crash Zone. I am a sucker for horror. This place is so cool, terrifying, but at the same time I love it, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up, the Ghost Tree. Now, this has to be one of my favorite biomes. Not my favorite. My favorite is coming soon, but it's definitely one of my favorites. It's overall just a beautiful biome. There's nothing dangerous there, and you can just kind of chill. So I'm gonna put it in S tier. Next up, the dunes. It's terrifying, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel like it's anywhere near up there with the Crash Zone, and I feel like they tried a little bit too hard to make it scary, so I'm gonna put it in D tier. The next one on the list is the Arctic Spires. This place is really scary, but just like the dunes, I feel like they tried a little bit too hard, and most of the time I feel like the ice worms there are more annoying than anything, so I'm gonna give it C tier. Next is the Grand Reef. Now, this place is really scary, and I like that they didn't just shove a million Leviathans in it like they did with the dunes. And really all they have is just one ghost Leviathan. And honestly, I feel like that's enough. So I'm going to give it B tier. Next is the Mushroom Forest. Earlier about the Ghost Tree, I mentioned that my favorite biome was later on. Well, here it is. I love this place. It's completely danger-free except for a single bone shark in one of them. So I'm going to give it S tier. It's a beautiful biome, and it's just a really fun place to be in. Now the Crystal Caves. I feel like with the Crystal Caves, it's really scary, but it's just difficult. A lot of the scares you get from it are generally pretty cheap, and I feel like the tension that you do feel is just too artificial, so I'm going to put it in E tier. Next we have ourselves the Sparse Reef. I really like the way that they designed this place. It's scary, but it also has no dangers at all, and all of its horror comes purely from tension. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Next is the Void. Now, I always felt like what they did with the Void was incredibly creative. Just the way, instead of creating some invisible barrier or some instant death thing, they just have it be in this completely empty area with ghost leviathans that are going to kill you if you aren't being safe. So I'm going to put it in B tier. And also, I just realized we haven't actually had any F tier ones yet. So I guess that's good. Now the Glacial Basin. This is definitely my favorite part of the land area. There's a lot of plants, there's a lot of creatures, it just feels very alive. It is very disconnected from the rest of the map, just like most of the places in Below Zero. So I am going to subtract some points for that, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier. Next is the Crag Field. The bone sharks here, I feel there's just too many of them, and there's really no reason to ever go to this biome except for the very end. So I'm gonna put it in F tier. Next up is the mountain island. The base here has to be one of my favorite bases in the game. I love the cave systems that they have going around it, and it's just really fun to explore. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. Next we have the Fabricator Caverns. Now, this place does suffer from the same thing as the Crystal Caverns, just here even more so. It's really cramped and easy to get lost in, and the Shadow Leviathans there do not leave you alone, even when you're not inside your vehicle. And when you're taking the prawn suit there, you can't even bring it inside of the base. So you either have to try and find a little hole in the ground to hide it in, or you have to just sacrifice it. And I feel like that's just really not good design. So I'm going to put it in F tier. Next we have the Grassy Plateaus. I love this place. There are a ton of resources. It's cool, it's pretty, it has reef backs, which is always a plus. And I feel like the best part of this is that it has so many fragments and so many resources. It's probably my favorite place to go grinding in the game, so I'm going to put it in S tier. Next we have the Bulb Zone. Now with the Bulb Zone, I feel like it suffers from the same thing as the Crag Field. There's just about nothing to do there, and the only thing to do there is explore a few wrecks. So overall, I'll give it an E tier. Now the Lilypads. I love the biome. It's really hard to build there because of how many rocks there are floating and how much plant life there is. So I am going to take a few points off of that and put it in D tier. Now the Lost River. Also one of my favorite biomes in the whole game. I love it. It's beautiful. It's a really cool concept. I don't feel like it quite deserves S tier, but I am going to put it in A tier. Next up is the Koppa mining site. I feel like it has a lot of good resources, and it's generally where you get the prawn suit fragments for Below Zero, but overall, it's kind of a boring place. There isn't a lot to do there, and throughout the game, you really only ever visit it once, maybe twice, so I'm going to put it in D tier. Next, we have the Kelp Forest. Just like with the Grassy Plateaus, it's really good for resources, and it's overall a really beautiful looking biome. But I am going to neglect a few points off of it just for being kind of bland at times. It's all the same thing, and I feel like there's a little bit too much kelp, so I'm going to put it in B tier. Next we have the Sea Treader's Path. It's a fun biome to go to, but overall there's no reason to go to it, and the only thing interesting there are the sea treaders, hence the name. So I'm actually going to put it in D tier. Next we have the Active Lava Zone. This biome is obviously really important to the story, and overall it's a cool looking biome, but I feel like it's a bit small, and just the game's performance really suffers because of the amount of pop in there is. So I am going to put it lower down in probably D tier. Next up is the Blood Kelp. It's pretty cool. There's not a lot to do there other than go down to the Lost River, and that's pretty much all I do. Now obviously the blood oil you can find there is really important, and you can't get that anywhere else, but this is a biased tier list, not a practical tier list, so I don't care. C tier. Now we have the Frozen Leviathan. This is probably one of my favorite destinations in both games, and it makes me really angry towards Unknown Worlds that they didn't actually add more reasons to go here, because you can play through all of Below Zero and never go here once, which really makes me really not happy at all. So I'm going to put it in A tier just for how cool the concept is. Now we have the Inactive Lava Zone. I feel like it's better in almost every way than the Active Lava Zone. Its atmosphere is a lot scarier, there's a lot more creatures, there's a lot more resources, and overall, it's probably one of the most important and coolest biomes in the whole game. So I'm going to give it B tier. Now we have the Underwater Islands. They're not that cool, they have a really important wreck, but I feel like they're most useful for resource collecting, so I'm actually going to put them in B tier. The Thermal Spires. It's definitely good for resource collecting. I feel like the stupid alligator things you find there are overall annoying, so I'm going to go ahead and put them in E tier. Now the Jellyshroom Caves. They are definitely one of my favorite biomes in all of Subnautica. They have beautiful plant life, beautiful atmosphere. The crab snakes are just terrifying, so I'm gonna put it in B tier. And finally, we have the Safe Shallows. It's a great biome. I feel like you go there a little too often, and it's kind of a freebie kind of biome. To be fair, it is the starter biome, so obviously there has to be a lot of resources and it has to be really safe, but I feel like they could have toned down the resources a little bit, and overall, not my favorite biome, so I'll put it in D tier. But anyway, thank you all for watching if you made it this far. Also, thank you, and I will see you in the next video. So, goodbye. Also, you should subscribe.